Once upon a time, Willa Bottleford carried oversized hydration trophy prop into hydration status arena set because water bottle status had apparently become a tiny household ceremony. Tiny polite pressure waited nearby. The object looked harmless, which is how many modern consumer problems introduce themselves before asking for an email address. The receipt stayed quietly theatrical. Willa Bottleford did not want drama. She wanted one simple purchase, one simple choice, and maybe a quiet evening with fewer pop-ups. Convenience wore its soft slippers, but the village of modern shopping had a talent for making ordinary decisions, wear velvet capes and ring little bells. The bargain kept excellent posture. This is the story of the water bottle status war, retold as a tiny clay disaster with warm lighting and suspiciously excellent manners. Nobody trusted the math yet. At first, the problem was small, a water bottle that somehow needed a social ranking, sitting in the corner like it had never ruined anyone's budget. A tiny committee formed emotionally. The village believed hydration becomes more powerful when everyone can recognize the container, which sounded reasonable only if nobody looked directly at the receipt. The button looked too pleased. So Willa Bottleford nodded, smiled, and stepped closer because confident design can make a trap feel like customer service. The room practiced innocent faces. The first promise was charming. The newest bottle gleamed like a tiny lifestyle promotion. A soft little trap smiled. It did not shout threaten or twirl a mustache. It simply used friendly colors and acted like the sensible option. The props understood the joke. Status water. Bottle Knight appeared nearby with the calm face of a creature who had read the terms and conditions for sport. Every corner felt lightly sponsored. Nobody called it a monster yet because consumer culture prefers softer words until the invoice has finished stretching. The silence had checkout energy. Then came the tiny nudge, the helpful suggestion, the little button that seemed to know exactly where the human thumb lived. Even the table looked concerned. Willa Bottleford felt smart for noticing the deal, which is one of the most expensive feelings a bargain can sell. Tiny polite pressure waited nearby. One more click became one more choice, and one more choice became a hallway with cheerful lights and no obvious exit. The receipt stayed quietly theatrical. The village applauded convenience because convenience is beloved when it arrives before the consequences have put on shoes. Convenience wore its soft slippers. By then, color-coded straw crown prop had entered the scene looking official enough to make nonsense feel organized. The bargain kept excellent posture. It was not evil. It was worse in a smaller way because it was useful, polite, and very hard to blame. Nobody trusted the math yet. Every option arrived carrying a tiny explanation, and every explanation brought a cousin named just in case. A tiny committee formed emotionally. Willa Bottleford tried to stay practical, but practicality kept getting distracted by little savings, little upgrades, and little emotional fireworks. The button looked too pleased. That is how the ceremony works. It shrinks the decision until the person forgets the total shape of the thing. The room practiced innocent faces. Soon, ordinary water started feeling underdressed, and the room became 2 emotional degrees colder. A soft little trap smiled. Status water, Bottle Knight, did a silent little bow, the kind performed by systems that are technically optional and somehow everywhere. The props understood the joke. The strangest part was that no single step looked outrageous. Every corner felt lightly sponsored. Each step looked tiny, reasonable, and almost boring, which is exactly how a maze avoids being recognized as a maze. The silence had checkout energy. Willa Bottleford began collecting questions the village did not want to answer. Even the table looked concerned. Who benefits when the obvious price hides behind soft language? Tiny polite pressure waited nearby. Who profits when canceling, comparing, choosing, or pausing feels like a tiny administrative quest? The receipt stayed quietly theatrical. And why does every helpful feature need to stand between a person and the simple truth of what they are buying? Convenience wore its soft slippers. The answers did not arrive dramatically. They arrived like receipts, one pale strip at a time. The bargain kept excellent posture. A tiny pile formed on the table, and the pile had the personality of a tired accountant. Nobody trusted the math yet. Willa Bottleford finally noticed the trick. The product was not only selling an object, service, or shortcut. A tiny committee formed emotionally. It was selling the feeling that friction had disappeared while quietly moving the friction into the future. The button looked too pleased. That future was small at first, almost cute, like a little Bill wearing pajamas. The room practiced innocent faces. But small future problems are still problems. They just arrive with better timing and fewer witnesses. A soft little trap smiled. The village kept saying, "Do not worry, this is normal." The props understood the joke. Normal, unfortunately, is not the same thing as harmless. Sometimes normal is just a costume that repetition wears. Every corner felt lightly sponsored. Willa Bottleford looked at oversized hydration trophy prop, then at color-coded straw crown prop, and felt the whole little theater become less magical. The silence had checkout energy. The colors were still friendly, the buttons were still rounded, and the promise was still humming in a cheerful key. Even the table looked concerned. But now the trick had edges. Tiny polite pressure waited nearby. So Willa Bottleford did the dangerous adult thing and made the decision visible. The receipt stayed quietly theatrical. She counted the cost, named the pressure, and refused to let a tiny convenience pretend it was destiny. Convenience wore its soft slippers. The room did not explode because most consumer spells are weaker when someone turns on the overhead light. The bargain kept excellent posture. Status, water, bottle night, shrank a little, not into nothing, but into its proper size, a tool, not a ruler. Nobody trusted the math yet. The village grumbled because it loved a good ceremony and hated a boring, clear answer. A tiny committee formed emotionally. Still, something useful happened. The choice became a choice again. The button looked too pleased. Not a lifestyle identity, not a secret test of discipline, not a maze with a checkout button wearing a crown. The room practiced innocent faces. Just a choice sitting on the table beside a person who had finally stopped performing for the purchase. A soft little trap smiled. That was the tiny miracle hidden inside the mess. The props understood the joke. Self-care gets silly when the cup becomes louder than the thirst. Every corner felt lightly sponsored. After that, Willa Bottleford still bought things because this is a fable, not a cave-dwelling manifesto. The silence had checkout energy, but she bought them with fewer illusions, fewer ceremonial clicks, and a much smaller audience in her head. Even the table looked concerned. And somewhere in trendy shelf battlefield, Set the trophy bottle finally held water and looked surprised by its purpose, which was embarrassing for everyone except the truth. Tiny polite pressure waited nearby.